Good morning. My name is Srini. I'm the CTO of Unwired. We're just expecting a few more people. Let's just give them a couple of seconds and then we should be good to start. So let me get started. What I want to do today is to take you through a few slides, and then I will do an online demo of how the Unwired digital form solution works. But before we start, let me also just let you all know that Alok is traveling and he would not be joining the call today, but I will take you through the entire process and handle whatever questions. So if you have any questions anytime during the webinar, please feel free to interrupt. You can unmute yourself and then speak up. That's not a problem. All right. So let's start by briefly looking at the agenda. What I want to do, like I said, is go through the architecture briefly, and then we will look at the multiple components that form up the Unwired digital form solution, which primarily comprises of the administration portal, the companion application to fill forms, both web and mobile, and of course, the most important piece in terms of the form builder and the integrations that are supported. So like I mentioned, the admin portal is the meat of the solution, permits you to basically design the forms and deploy them for the different users. It's basically what you can call a no-code or a low-code system that allows you to design forms quickly. The administration portal comes with companion applications. So you have a web app, which is what we will look at today, the easiest to do on a webinar, where we'll go through how you fill out these forms and then submit them, and how managers and administrators can keep track of progress. And of course, they also come with iOS and Android applications, and Windows will be available by the end of this year. Integrations, let me jump into the architecture slide, then I can show you that. The integrations, we basically support, given that the underlying platform that the digital forms is enabled on is what's called the Unwired digital platform. It allows you to basically integrate out of the box with any enterprise system which supports either a SOAP or a REST-based access. We also integrate natively with SAP, both the earlier versions of ECC and the current versions of the HANA cloud system. We also integrate with any SQL compliant database. And so the entire integration process is out of the box via the digital platform. Excuse me. So if you have existing services that you want to leverage, it primarily is kind of a low-code system, and we will look at that a little bit. But if you also need to make, let's say, custom integrations with other systems, that's also possible. And we will briefly look at how that's something you can do. The form builder is a drag and drop builder, allows you to basically put together your forms. There are multiple controls that you can use. You can set up simple business logic. You can do mandatory checking. You can have formatting. And you can also write, excuse me, a little bit of JavaScript code if that is something that the designer is capable of. Then that will also handle custom client-side validations. And this would help to make sure that the data that is getting filled is compliant with your rules. So like I mentioned, we have integrations to SAP, IBM Maximo for the work maintenance solutions primarily. We also integrate with SharePoint. In terms of, for customers, what we've done is finalizing, forms that have been filled and checking in the PDF versions into the SharePoint system so that there's some kind of an audit trail. And then, of course, the more cloud-friendly systems like a Box or a Dropbox, OneDrive, and so on. Effectively, collecting data from the users is only one part of the problem. The bigger problem that we also solve is taking that into backend systems so that you finally have the data available in a form that can be utilized either in your ERP systems or maybe your analytics systems, etc. So let me jump into the demo. And like I mentioned, feel free to stop me in case you have any questions at any point of time. So what you're looking at is the digital forms administration application. And what this allows you to do is basically manage the entire forms system, primarily starting with the users / teams that have access to the forms, design the forms themselves. We also have a concept that we call as form sets. So let me briefly touch upon that. Form sets, as the name implies, there's just a set of forms, but maybe for logical reasons, maybe you want to submit a particular form to maybe an SAP system, or maybe a Salesforce, and some of the data to maybe just a database, or you want to make a PDF and then submit it to an open text or a SharePoint system, for example. So what you can do is you can design a set of forms and then group these forms together into what's called a form set. And then when users fill the form, they're actually trying to fill the form set. So, they can fill the individual forms, complete them and submit them. And a form set is set to be completed only when all the forms that are part of it get completed. Master data is another interesting concept. So when you look at examples, and I will show you one of them today, like an SAP, let's say sales order creation form, you probably don't want to have your users searching and typing in customers or maybe the kind of products you can sell to them, but you actually want to have the form pre-populated with it. And that's what we call master data. So you can actually effectively integrate master data from external systems into the forms portal, so that when the users fill the forms, they have access to this master data readily in drop-downs or combo boxes, so that you can just select them. And you can also have a related data filled in based on that. And I will show you that example of the sales order. Okay, so let's briefly look at users and teams. User is the fundamental entity within the system. Users can be either created in the system directly, or you can also integrate via single sign-on from your Active Directory. Users can have one of three roles. They can be either administrators. Admins here are not technical admins, but more business admins. So admins are allowed to not just create users and teams, but also to create the forms, that is, design them and assign them to users or teams so that people can start filling them. Managers is one level below. They have access to all the data that is being filled by their team members. You can also optionally configure if the managers are allowed to change the data. And users are the lowest or least access rights, where they're only allowed to fill forms. Of course, every role, be it an admin or a manager or a user, are allowed to fill forms. So that goes without saying. However, users don't work with forms individually. So what you actually have is a team. A team can be corporate HR. It could be a sales team. It could be a maintenance team. So any group of people working either in a department or a particular function can make a team. There are no restrictions as far as the system is concerned. It's just a logical grouping that you make. And you can then have users assigned to these teams. Now, once you have a team, you can actually have the team getting access to a set of forms. So here, the sales demo team, for example, has access to an inspection form, a machine data sheet, and a sales order form. So it's only forms that the team has access to that they can actually fill. What this allows you to do is, for example, to set up corporate HR and have HR-related data collection, for example, grouped in that and assigned to those teams. Maybe you can have leave requests, for example, as common forms for all teams. You can have maintenance-related forms being filled by the maintenance team and so on. Right? We will look at the assignment and the different workflows possible within that shortly. So I'm going to the main tab, which is the Forms tab, and I'm going to spend some time here. So on the left, you see different categories. So you can also add a category if you want to on the fly. categories are just containers to hold the forms. So it's kind of an easy grouping if you have a number of forms. So let's look at the two forms that I want to demo today. One is the inspection form, and the other, of course, is the sales order form. You can also look at the machine data sheet. So the sales order form that I will show you first is basically a form that is used for order taking. Okay, let me do that. Okay, there was a request to mute all participants. I've just done that. If anyone wants to ask any question, please unmute yourself. All right, so the sales order form is basically a form designed, in this case, as an example to accept orders and then create them in SAP. So let's look at that. So what you have here is the main screens, options that you see from sales orders. For example, you have versions 1 and 2. Then you have something you call as a draft version. Now, what this indicates is once you design a form and then let's say you publish it for your users to start working with it, you might want to still make revisions or changes to the forms. It could be maybe additional fields you're adding, or maybe you're just tweaking something. And in this case, what happens is the form that you have revised stays as a draft version until you actually publish it. So this allows you to work and design, make changes to existing forms while users continue to work with the last versions. We also have the ability to have multiple versions of the form live. So what does that mean? Let's say you have set up that 3 versions of the form or something that people can work with. So if let's say someone started already filling a form 1 and you've published, let's say 3 versions or revisions, they can continue to work with that until they complete it. Once they complete it and try to create a new form instance to fill, it would then pick the latest version. So if you have, let's say, added some new fields and not yet trained the field force, they won't get confused in terms of, oh, what's this new field that they need to fill, but they can continue to work with the old one. Let's jump into the design, which is something I want to spend a few minutes on. So what you're seeing is a sample form. Like I mentioned, this is to create a sales order on SAP. So there's an order type, which is basically a selection based on master data. You have a list of customers, the sales areas that these customers belong to, and then you have a bunch of materials and their related unit of measures we will look at when we start filling the form, which is all related to master data. So material is master data, UOM is related to the material. Materials themselves are filtered based on the sales area that you select for a customer, right? So on the left side, what you see are a bunch of controls that you can actually use to design this form. So there are normal standard fields like text fields or text areas, numbers, passwords, selects, etc. And then you have more advanced controls like email, URL, etc., phone numbers. So basically these come with input masks attached. So if you pick, for example, an email, it would expect you to put an @ and a dot so that the email format is filled out. You can optionally also set up email validation based on online services, right? You can collect digital signatures in the form, and I will show you an example of that. And how you lay out these controls is pretty flexible. So you can actually have them side by side, like what you see here in terms of columns. You can have 3, 4, 5 columns as you require. You can also put them into a table. Now a table basically gives you the ability to collect a fixed number of rows of data, right? So if you know that you have to collect, I don't know, 5 rows of data, you can actually put them into a table, and that would suffice and that would serve you well. But if you look at forms like, for example, what you're looking at here, which is the sales order, there's never a fixed set of items that you can sell. You want to sell as much as possible. So in that case, what you can do is you can use what's called a data grid. So you can group controls within them. And then when you start filling them, you would start getting a plus symbol that would allow you to add as many rows as you require. So let me quickly show you, for example, if I need to add a new field, let's say I want to add a new text field. I'm just going to drag and drop it here somewhere. So opens up, you can set up what the label is, what the placeholder text should be. tooltip in case you're using a mouse-based system, etc. And you can also set up the, let's look at that validation. So if you want, you can make the field mandatory. You can also set it up as unique. Now, what unique means is maybe, for example, you can have a product, only one line item in a particular order. So you can set that up so that the backend system would actually check when we complete this form and throw an error in case it's not unique. So if you need to have, for example, only one item of that type, you could potentially use that. You can set up things like minimum length, maximum length, etc. But in addition to that, if you want to have more validations, you can actually put in a little bit of JavaScript if that is something you're comfortable with. So it's basically a fairly simple, like I said, no code / low code system that allows you to drag and drop controls and then design your form. You can add any of the controls that you saw on the left. Now, once you have done that, let me just save this, although I haven't made any major changes. Let's look at the test option. This allows you to see the form, how it would be rendered on the device or on the browser. So you have the order type, for example, delivery date, etc. So you can go ahead, and this is what I mentioned, that you can keep adding as many rows as you require. And the rule set up is that you need to have at least one item in the order, which is why you're not allowed to delete the last item. So now that you're happy with the form, so what you can then do is potentially start assigning it. So we've already made some assignments, and let me show that to you. Let's go back to the forms. Okay, hang on. Let me just refresh this. Okay, so let's go back to the list of forms. We were looking at the sales order. So if you look at assignments, like I said, it's been assigned to the demo team, and I belong to that. So I'm actually going to be able to use this form to fill. If it's assigned to any form sets, you would actually see that here. You can also set up what are called schedules. So if, for example, you have an inspection form that people need to fill on a weekly basis or monthly, etc., you can actually set up a schedule. So what this does is you can choose the team that it has to be set up for, the priority of the tasks, what's the potential due date. You set that in terms of the number of days from the time it's created. And then you can say whether it's a daily, weekly, or a monthly schedule. And you have a number of options which give you a very flexible scheduling mechanism. What happens then is every day when the scheduler runs, it automatically creates the form instances and then pushes them down to the device of the user, so that users, when they log in, they already see the updated forms that they need to fill, and they can then go ahead and complete them. Translations basically allow you to set up forms so that they can be used in multiple languages. Let's look at assignments again, so I can show you a couple of workflows that we have built in. So when you look at the assignment, you can say to which team you've assigned it, of course. And once you do that, 3 workflows open up for you. So the first one is what's called as the shared model. So in the shared mode, what happens is everyone who's filling the form or that particular instance of the form works on the same data, right? So maybe you're part of an inspection team and you're out on a round and you want everybody to be performing this data collection or form filling as a group. You can then enable the shared mode so that everyone works on the same data. There's basic conflict resolution built in, and people can actually check the conflicted data and then accept or reject it. Within the shared model, there are two modes. One is where only one user can fill a form at a time. So in this case, what happens is everybody sees the data that's being partially filled, but they would not be able to make changes until the time the form is checked in or released, and then they can pick it up and continue to work on it. If you choose the option where all users can fill concurrently, then everybody can actually make changes. The second option that's available is to enable review. So there are 2 kinds of reviews possible. One is by a user. The user can actually be a manager of the team also. If you also choose a team, it can be that one team fills the data and then submits it, and on completion, another team actually reviews it. So they get a new copy of the form, and then they can work through that to review it, ask feedback, and then they can either pass or fail the review, based on which the task or the form continues its workflow, and the original team can then fill that again. But if the review is successful, then the form gets finalized and then data posted to the backend systems. The last option is a shift handoff. So this is basically where you have, again, mostly a maintenance scenario where you have the morning shift, for example, guys fill data and then they submit it, and then the shift is initiated, and then the subsequent team then gets hold of the data, the same copy of data, and then they work with it. This can be endless. It can be a weekly cycle or a monthly cycle where you keep collecting data between the shifts. And then once the cycle completes, you can then finalize it. So those are 3 potential workflows that are automated within the system that you can set up. Now, having seen this part, if there are no questions here, what I will do is I will move to the companion app briefly to show you how the forms are filled. And then we will come back to the admin portal to see how the data flows. Okay, and then lastly, we will talk about the integration possibilities. So what you're seeing is the web version of the companion application. Basically, this is what users see when they want to fill forms. The same interface is available, like I mentioned, on iOS, both iPads and iPhones, Android tablets and phones, and Windows tablet is currently under development, should be released by the end of the month. So what you see on the left side are my forms that I've been partially filling. What I'm going to do is to start a new form. So you see the list of forms that are actually assigned to me and I have access to. So let's pick up the sales order form that we spent some time in designing. And once I start the option to fill, I have the form that's actually been designed available for me to start filling out. So I'm going to pick a standard order. Let me choose tomorrow. Then I have a list of customers, and this is what we refer to as master data. So these are customers which are on our SAP IDIS box. For people familiar with SAP, you would probably recollect these names. So let me choose one of the customers. Let me put in a dummy pure number. Let's leave that for the time being. And then you have the sales organization. The sales organization are actually filtered based on the customer. So if you choose a different customer, you would actually have a different sales org. So let me pick that up. Let me set a payment term. And now you have the different items that you're actually filling for the sales order. So I can choose the material. The description is auto-populated. I can put in a quantity. Like I mentioned, the unit of measure is related data to the material. I can add another one just to show how this thing works. And then maybe I put in a quantity 2. Now, I'm happy with the order, so I can go ahead and then try to save it. Immediately, I have an option, confirmation that the form is partially filled. I can actually in the background see the error and whether I want to still save it. So let me cancel that, and maybe I put in some kind of a pure number. And now, since all data is completed, I have an option to also mark it as complete, which means I've, from my end, completed the order taking. So let me do that. And then I save, and the data now gets submitted to the forms backend for further processing. So now that the form is submitted, you also see that the sales order was successfully created on SAP, and I have an order number as an alert that's pushed down to my system. So I know that now the order was created on SAP, and then it's actually also confirmed that to me. Let me now go back to the admin portal and show you the last aspect here, which was on reports. So let me pick completed tasks, and we do a search. So let's check. Yeah, this was the one I was working on. So when I open that, I actually have an online access to the data that was submitted. And this is irrespective whether it's partial or complete data, I would have access to that. So as a manager, I can actually see this, and it allows me to also keep track of partial work that my team has done. So I can either use the client app to look at it if I'm also part of that group, or I can also keep monitoring it via the administration portal. Please note that this is not meant as a replacement or an analytics system based on what a BI or similar system could do for you. But this is to basically get some quick reports in terms of work in progress. So you can have various filter criteria, for example, what the name of the form, who submitted it. You can also look for delayed submission. So if you have set a due date, you can actually check for forms which are submitted after that. So it kind of helps, like I said, for managers to keep track of it. As a second example, let me pull up the inspection form. So this gives you the view where, for example, let me put some kind of number and say there is no damage. Now, once I'm done with it, I can actually also attach a digital signature. So whatever signature is captured can be treated as a completion or a sign off from the user. So let me do the partial saving this time, since I haven't given the reference number. And since I haven't marked it as completed, if you go back and actually look for in progress forms, should hopefully be able to see that. So let's look at that. Now what you see here is the data that was just submitted. Now as a manager, since I'm allowed to actually make changes, I can actually go ahead and then fill in a reference number, for example, maybe because the user wasn't aware of it. And I can now go back to the partially filled form that I had. Oops, okay, something wrong there, but ideally I should have seen my form number here, reference number, so that I can then actually go ahead and then complete that. So once I complete the form now, I should be able to then view the form in terms of a completed model as far as the analytics or the reporting part out here is concerned. Still taking some time because I think we've hooked up to a backend ServiceNow system. That's probably taking a little time. So let me jump back to the slide to basically talk a little bit about the integration, because this is something that a lot of people have had questions on. So the underlying platform that the digital form system leverages is actually the Unwired digital platform. And this allows you to actually make integrations in a simple fashion with systems like SAP, Maximo, SharePoint, etc. that I mentioned, where we have ready-made interfaces built in, and you could actually leverage those. You can also, have, sorry for going back and forth, but let me just jump in here and show you one additional aspect that allows you to set up some simple workflows. So if you go to the attribute section, for example, you'd be able to see I have some custom attributes out here which talk about the submit handlers, webhooks, and email PDFs. So basically what this allows you to do, especially the submit webhook is of interest. So I can put in a webhook URL here. For example, maybe it's an endpoint in your Salesforce system. So when the form gets finalized and successfully reviewed if required, the data gets automatically posted to that URL. So this allows you to get data at near real time for you to process further in your backend. On the other hand, if you prefer a pull model, then we do have REST APIs that you can use to have, maybe some kind of batch jobs running at the end of the day and pulling all completed forms. Alternatively, you can actually write custom handlers in the digital platform. And this is basically Java code that can be written that allows you to do mashups, for example, submit part of the data to SAP, collect the order number, and then add that to a form field, and then finalize the PDF, which you can then check into a SharePoint system. So you could potentially do that by hacking a little code. So you can choose the level of integration you want. If you want to handle everything outside, which is the leanest form of integration, use a webhook, capture the data, and then process it further. We are also planning an integration with, for example, Microsoft's new Power Apps, so that a workflow can be created on the Microsoft side. So similarly, you can use a webhook here to basically start a workflow wherever you want to, or you can have really heavy integration, business logic. The heavy lifting will be done by the platform, and this allows you to then, update multiple systems, create mashups, etc. Master data follows a similar logic, so you can either have REST APIs that you use to push data into the system, or you can write handlers which will then go ahead and then pull the data from your external systems as and when required. So that's primarily what I wanted to share. And there's one question as to whether it can be integrated to Smartsheet. Yes, Albert, that's possible. Like I said, the underlying platform is what we use to also build our mobile and web apps. So there's a heavy or a thick integration layer that's available, and we can potentially integrate with any system which has a standard interface like SQL database or REST or SOAP-based system, for example, out of the box. On the other hand, if you're dealing with systems systems that are not directly supported, for example, we're currently working on a project with a customer where the integration is to their legacy ERP system, which does not have any standard interfaces available, but they do have file adapters. So we basically have the integration where we dump our data into a custom format and then their system picks that up. So you can either do standard integrations like that, or you can also have custom integrations where systems don't support an external interface. The entire thing, like I said, is powered by the Unwired digital platform. So anything that that platform is capable of is something that the firm can leverage. But given that forms typically result in either lightweight processes or heavy business logic that we need to run, you can use one of these two options to handle that. If you just want, for example, to get an email of the PDF version of the form fill, you could just put in comma separated list of emails here. So when the form gets finalized, a PDF version of that form would automatically get emailed to the recipient here. So if you have some kind of mail workflows that are set up in your organization, you could also use this to trigger that. Or maybe you want to create a support ticket and then attach the data to that, you could do that. So the kind of integrations, depending on the complexity, you would choose either a webhook or a handler, or just to email the PDF. We're working on more standard integrations for this, and we're also, as part of the roadmap, looking at a potential workflow engine that's integrated as a part of it, so that you can go ahead and then integrate with other systems. One of the other questions I see is how we differentiate from other solutions. The key thing, I think I would put it at two parts. From the technology standpoint, I think the key thing that you see here is the enterprise platform that we have, which powers our mobile and web apps, is the same thing that powers the forms system. So it gives you the ability to integrate with practically any system that might potentially be used within an organization. But from a more solution implementation standpoint, I think what you have is access to a team, set of people who have, we've been working with integration specifically for the last about 12 years as part of Unwired. We are an SAP integration partner also. We also partner with IBM on Maximo. So the team understands the enterprise integration requirements at a very detailed level, and we can supplement your team and set up these complicated workflows for you. And that's, I think, also a key differentiator when we look at two solutions, because the low code, no code part of it is good in terms of the process enablement, in terms of designing and creating these forms and having a self-consumption model. From an integration standpoint, is where we also come in. And either we can do that, or potentially if you have an IT team within your organization, you could do that. So we have a lot of training and hand-holding that is done by an expert team that can help you to achieve this integration. We have customers across who've been, basically we've integrated data collection, more than about 80 plus forms for a Canadian customer, the system is used 24/7. So given that they are in multiple geographies, the farm system actually collects data throughout the day. So while the US, the North America is not using it, you have people in the Middle East and other areas using it. And these are basically farm data that is filled in offshore rigs where they have flaky or no connectivity. Sometimes farm data is collected for about 4 weeks, and then boom, once you're in office, automatically everything gets submitted and then finalized, and creates the required objects in SAP. Okay, there's another question in terms of whether the platform is cloud or on-prem. So let me also answer that. We do mostly offer our cloud solution, which is the application and the platform you see which is deployed. But the second option is that if you, for whatever reason, security, IT, organization policies, etc., prefer to run this on-prem, the same software can be deployed on-prem for you. There's basically no change. So the same security, the same encryption standards, etc., that are followed by the multi-tenant cloud is the same thing that can be installed on-prem for you. And the pricing is the same. It's basically a SaaS model. And we support both on-prem and the pure cloud model here. Product licensing is basically SaaS model, like I mentioned. It's on a per user basis. Starts with a small number for a small set of users. I will have Alok or one of us will send the pricing information, and it goes up in tiers based on the number of users that you have. There are no restrictions in the number of forms that you can create, the number of forms that people can fill, the number of devices they can access on, be it iPhone, iPad, Android. Every user has access to every potential device and browser touch point. There are no limitations there. It's just a simple dollar cost per user per month. And you can, like I said, design as many forms as you require. There is no pricing difference between the type of users. So you can have everyone as an administrator if that's what you prefer. There are no differences there. And if you choose an on-prem model, then along with the monthly pricing, there is a one-time implementation cost that you will actually bear to move this model into the on-prem data center or data center. We also have some of our customers running this on Azure, and it runs on dedicated instances. So it's a hybrid version, if you might call it that, of an on-prem model where instead of running it within the organization's data center, it actually runs on Azure, but on dedicated instances privately accessed only by that customer. So that's another model that's possible. The licensing is the same, the pricing is the same, the software is the same. You can also jump between on-prem to cloud or cloud to on-prem. Given that the system is the same, there's basically no difference in the software that's deployed. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's pretty good. We are just about 30 seconds left. So as a follow-up, what I will do is, okay, let me just check this. There's one more question. In terms of security, so the platform has been built for the enterprise. So number one, all data on the wire is on HTTPS/SSL. Number two, data on the device is encrypted and protected by the device's isolation capabilities. And all data is AES 256 encrypted on the device. Data at rest on the cloud or in the, like I said, on-prem systems are all again encrypted. We do not use database encryption, we use app encryption, which means every data row that exists in the database is actually encrypted and saved based on company or tenant specific keys. So even if you have access to the database, you would not be able to actually see the data. The only way is to access it via the APIs. In terms of how quickly do customers ramp up, it really depends. If you have simple integration needs like what I mentioned here, like a submit handler, or sorry, webhook, for example, and you just need to design forms, the cloud instance can be provisioned for you within an hour. And we have people starting to play around with the system in a couple of days' time. If it's a cloud, so that they get familiar using the training or the handholding we do, and then people start designing the forms. Deployment go live, if your integration needs are just the webhook and the PDF, it basically takes no time. You give us an endpoint, data will start flowing to that. So you can look at potentially 5+ days for simple integration needs. And if you're looking at an integration with systems like SAP, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. The development needs, if you want to have integration done, it's basically core Java. There are no J2EE or web Java development requirements. It's just simple Java. So if someone is familiar with C#, they should be able to get up and running with the system using Java in about a week's time. It shouldn't take longer. Number two, we have a lot of samples that we provide. And even if we build the integration for you, while the platform itself is our IP, the integration that we build for customers, we do provide the source code also. So we can get a simple integration started, show how it's done, and then you can use the sample that's been built to start leveraging that within the organization to roll out further. Full source code and support is provided for that. All our software is up on samples on GitHub, and the plugins, etc., are all available. So what I can do is follow up to this meeting, also send the information for that. Front-end development, basically the form itself is drag and drop. Like I showed you, there's no coding required. But if you need to have any simple business rules that you want to run on the client, it can be done in JavaScript. Let me show you that. Or you could also do that in a JSON definition. So let's just take, for example, this control here. You look at validation. So you can have custom validation that's basically done in JavaScript. Or if you're familiar with an open source system called as JSON Logic, you can use that to set up rules such as this without having to write any code. So those are two formats supported on the front end. Okay, so thanks a lot for your time today on the call and all the questions. It's been a really good session. I will follow up by having the recording of this session sent out in case you need it. We'll also send the slides that I used today. And subsequently, we can also provide you with samples or any other information you require. Alok has actually reminded me to also mention that, all of you who have attended this webinar, we're happy to offer a free POC. So we could actually potentially take a simple form that you might want to, test with. So we can design that and provide you a sandbox where you can actually play around with it, and then have some simple submissions of those forms to your sandbox system. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to Alok, and we would be happy to help you with a free POC there. All right. Thanks a lot for your time, and have a good day. Thank you.